Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to guide you through the complete process of getting Bougainvillea to bloom beautifully. Produce flowers evenly, develop rich vibrant colors, and most importantly, maintain a strong and healthy root base over time. Many Bougainvillea growers often face problems such as plants producing lots of leaves but very few flowers, or blooming well for only a few cycles before becoming weak, losing root strength, and becoming difficult to recover later on. In reality, if you want a Bougainvillea plant to have a beautiful structure, bloom frequently, and still stay healthy for many years, you need to follow the correct process from the very beginning, starting with pruning after the flowers fade, properly growing new branches and foliage, identifying the perfect semi-mature branch stage, applying the right water stress technique, and finally caring for the buds once flowering begins. In this video, I will explain every stage in detail and show you the exact signs to look for, so even beginners will be able to understand when to prune, when to let the plant grow, and when to stress the plant for the best flowering results without weakening the tree. Stage 1. Pruning after the flowers fade or begin to fade. Once Bougainvillea flowers have been blooming for some time, their color will gradually start to fade, the petals will become thinner, and the edges may begin to dry out slightly. This is the best time to start preparing the plant for a new flowering cycle. You should not wait until all the flowers completely dry out and fall off naturally, because by then the plant will already have used a large amount of energy to maintain the blooms, making recovery slower and more difficult. When pruning, always use sharp and clean pruning shears to avoid crushing the branches or creating openings for fungal infections and diseases. First, remove all the old flower clusters. Then examine the flowering branch and cut back about 2 to 4 leaf nodes below the old flowers. Pruning this way encourages the plant to activate dormant buds and produce multiple new shoots evenly along the branch. It also helps the plant create more growing tips, which means the next flowering cycle will be fuller and more balanced. If some branches are excessively long or growing unevenly, you can prune slightly deeper to reshape the plant. However, avoid cutting too aggressively into old woody branches unless the plant is very healthy or you intentionally want to redesign its structure. Bougainvillea still needs a certain amount of mature wood to recover quickly and continue flowering consistently. After pruning, remove any yellow leaves, old leaves, dry twigs, or unhealthy growth to improve airflow around the plant. This is also a good time to inspect for pests such as mealybugs, spider mites, or fungal problems hidden in branch joints and leaf clusters. If pests are ignored during the recovery stage, the plant can weaken significantly and produce poor quality shoots later. Immediately after pruning, water the plant thoroughly once to help it recover and stimulate new growth. At this stage, the plant should not be kept excessively dry because it has just lost a large amount of foliage and flowers, so it needs stable moisture to recover properly. However, the growing medium must still drain very well because Bougainvillea is extremely sensitive to root rot caused by excessive moisture. A healthy and well-aerated root system is the foundation for strong flowering later on. Stage 2. Recovery and growing new shoots. A few days after pruning, the dormant buds will begin swelling and producing new shoots. This is an extremely important stage because the quality of the next flowering cycle depends heavily on how well the branches are developed during this period. Many people become impatient and try to force flowering too early by withholding water or using bloom stimulants before the branches mature. As a result, the plant may produce small flowers, weak color, short-lasting blooms, or sometimes only leaves instead of flower buds. During this stage, the main goal is to grow strong and healthy branches with stable foliage. The plant should be placed in a location with strong sunlight and good airflow. Bougainvillea is a sun-loving plant, and the more direct sunlight it receives, the healthier it becomes and the more likely it is to flower heavily later. In insufficient light, the plant tends to produce long, weak branches with large dark green leaves, but very few flowers. Ideally, Bougainvillea should receive at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every day. During long rainy periods or cloudy weather, growth slows significantly and flowering becomes more difficult. Regarding watering, stable moisture is important during the recovery stage to support new shoot development. However, this does not mean the soil should stay constantly wet. The best watering method for Bougainvillea is to water thoroughly until the entire root zone is saturated. Then allow the growing medium to gradually dry before watering again. This watering cycle encourages strong root growth and improves oxygen circulation around the roots. If the soil remains wet continuously, the leaves often become soft, shoots weaken, and the plant becomes more vulnerable to fungal diseases and root rot. About 5 to 7 days after pruning, you can begin applying a light fertilizer to support branch development. Organic compost or balanced fertilizers such as 16168 or 20-20-20 can be used at a lower concentration than the recommended dosage to avoid root stress. During this stage, the plant needs nitrogen to grow leaves and new shoots. But excessive nitrogen should still be avoided because it can produce overly soft branches and excessively dark green foliage, which later reduces flowering performance. If the plant is healthy, new shoots will continue growing actively over the following weeks. Leaves will gradually thicken, and the new branches will extend noticeably. Stage 3. Growing the branches to the semi-mature stage. This is the most important stage in the entire Bougainvillea flowering process because if the timing is incorrect, the later water stress stage will often fail to trigger flowering effectively. After approximately 25 to 40 days, depending on weather conditions and plant vigor, the young branches will gradually reach what growers commonly call the semi-mature stage. At this point, the branches are no longer soft and immature, but they are not fully old and woody either. This is the stage where Bougainvillea responds most strongly to water stress and is most likely to initiate flower buds. Several signs can help identify semi-mature branches. First, the growing tips slow down and stop extending rapidly. The spaces between leaf nodes become shorter, and the leaves themselves become smaller and thicker. The leaf color usually changes to a moderate green instead of the deep lush green seen during vigorous vegetative growth. The branches also become firmer and slightly harder, while the outer bark begins changing from bright green to light brown or grayish tones. This is the ideal time to prepare the plant for flowering. During this stage, many growers make the mistake of continuing to apply large amounts of nitrogen fertilizer or watering too heavily. This causes the plant to keep focusing on producing leaves and shoots instead of preparing for flowering. Once the branches have reached the proper maturity, nitrogen should be reduced gradually, and the plant should be maintained in a healthy but not excessively vigorous state. A plant with extremely lush green growth is not necessarily a plant that will flower well. Stage 4. Water stress to trigger flower bud formation. Once the plant has produced enough semi-mature branches, the water stress process can begin. This is the most critical technique for flowering Bougainvillea because it creates mild stress that shifts the plant from vegetative growth into reproductive growth, meaning it changes from producing leaves to producing flowers. At this stage, watering should be drastically reduced or temporarily stopped, depending on weather conditions and pot size. If the plant is growing in a small pot with a fast-draining medium under hot sunlight, water stress may only need to last 3 to 5 days. Larger pots or plants growing in the ground may require a longer period. During the water stress stage, the plant should be monitored daily rather than following a fixed schedule. The goal is only to make the plant slightly thirsty. Signs of proper stress include slightly soft leaves, slower shoot growth, and mild drooping during the hottest part of the day. The plant should never be allowed to wilt severely or drop leaves heavily because excessive stress weakens the plant and greatly delays recovery. Once the plant reaches the correct level of dryness, watering should resume with one deep and thorough watering. This recovery watering is the moment when the plant begins activating flower bud formation most intensely. After watering, a light application of high phosphorus and high potassium fertilizer such as MKPO 5234 or NPK June 30-30 can be used to support flower bud development. These fertilizers should always be applied lightly because excessive amounts can burn the roots or shock the plant, especially after a dry period. Stage 5. Bud development and flower care. approximately 7 to 15 days after recovery watering. Small flower buds will usually begin appearing at the branch tips or leaf joints near the ends of the branches. This stage requires very stable care because sudden changes in watering or nutrition can cause the plant to abort its buds or return to producing leaves instead. Once buds are visible, high nitrogen fertilizers should no longer be used because nitrogen encourages vegetative growth that competes with flower development. At this point, the plant mainly needs strong sunlight, moderate watering, and good airflow. Watering during the bud stage is extremely important. The plant should not remain excessively dry for long periods because the buds may shrivel or fall off. However, overwatering must also be avoided because too much moisture can push the plant back into vegetative growth. The best method is still to water thoroughly and then allow the growing medium to gradually dry before watering again. During rainy weather, extra care should be taken to prevent water from remaining trapped in the pot because Bougainvillea roots are highly sensitive to poor oxygen conditions, which can quickly lead to bud drop. Once the flowers begin developing full color, the plant should continue receiving strong direct sunlight because intense sunlight improves flower color and extends bloom duration. Plants grown in low light conditions often produce pale flowers that fade quickly. During this entire flowering stage, avoid rotating the pot or frequently changing the plant's position because Bougainvillea can respond by dropping buds or developing uneven flowering patterns.
After the flowering cycle finishes and the blooms begin fading again, the entire process is repeated from the beginning. Pruning, growing new branches, waiting for the branches to mature, and then applying water stress to trigger the next flowering cycle. When this process is done correctly, Bougainvillea can produce dense, vibrant, and long-lasting flowers repeatedly throughout the year while still maintaining strong overall health.